Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, Internet. I'm back and I'm excited, I must tell you, because we had a fantastic series on the artillerist and the use of artillery during the Bush War and some history as well. And of course, you people, many thousands of you actually watched it. And you had some good comments and asking questions. And so I asked General Firstbom Lobsher to come back and to explain to us, the different questions you had to answer it for us. And so welcome, sir. Thank you so much for your time once again. Really appreciate you. I know you have a list of the questions there in front of you, but if needs be, I can definitely ask them myself. And I want to thank all of you who asked the questions and made the comments. I did not ban anybody from this series, which is kind of a record. So if you have any questions, guys, please just put it in a polite way, so we understand what you want and what you are getting at, and then we'll try to answer for the sake of history, because there will be people in the future who will have no clue what's a G2, what is a 25-pounder, what is a G5 and a G6, and so we have to answer this by way of speaking the way we do here. The first question I have here, and guys, I'm summarizing it for you, is basically about the booster of a 155mm G5 round, where it is said it is known as base bleed. And then there's an explanation about it, that it's an attachment at the hollow rear of artillery projectile, which once fired creates a gas that fills a vacuum behind the projectile in flight. I've heard that, I agree with that. And then he says here that he makes a statement that where your standard ammunition, I suppose for standard charges as well, will shoot about 30 kilometers, 30. This base bleed will make it go about 7 kilometers further. So my question to you, sir, is this correct? And also, how does this work with booster and base bleed? And is it 7 kilometers or is it a little bit more? Because I've heard that with base bleed, you can shoot up to about 42, 43 kilometers far. And I don't know how accurate either at that range.
Thank you. First of all, the term or word booster is not correct. The standard 155mm shell has got a hollow bottom, and firing a standard shell create a lot of drag in the form of air pressure swirling around the hollow base of the projectile, and that swirling of the air has got a braking effect on the projectile. Now, to neutralize that swirling effect, one use a what is your word?
Base bleed.
One use the base bleed component, which simply boils down to the fact that the standard base is unscrewed. The whole bottom base is unscrewed, and in its place, the base bleed component is screwed on. Now, all that this base bleed component does is when the round is fired, inside the base bleed component, there's also a mixture that starts burning, and it gives off a gas. And that gas to the rear simply neutralizes or cancels the tendency of the air to swirl around. It cancels that effect, and by canceling that, you attain more range But the base bleed component is not a booster. It simply cancels the swirling of air on a standard projectile. And then mention is here made of 30-kilometer range, additional 7 kilometers. That is of no importance, because it depends, the range that you will achieve always depends on the charge you are using, whether you are using base bleed or not, the elevation at which that round is fired, and then a lot of meteorological and other conditions, as well as conditions inherent to the gun itself. For example, the quality of the barrel. Is the barrel worn out, or is it a fresh barrel? There are a lot of elements that will determine for a given elevation how far that round would go. And then the other thing which is very important, many people don't know it. If you read about a range given for a gun at whatever elevation, that range is normally based on meteorological conditions at sea level. But away from sea level, on higher ground, you automatically get an increase in a range, because the air is thinner, to put it bluntly. But if you really want additional range for a given elevation, then you use base bleed. The other interesting thing about base bleed, Russian ammunition, base bleed or booster, whatever you want to call it, burns in red. Our base bleed burns in yellow. And also so in the case of our multiple rocket launchers. The G4 was a 155mm gun manufactured by a company called Soltam in Israel. Actually, Soltam is originally a company in Finland, but they sort of gave license to the Israelis to produce it in Israel. I also had the privilege of visiting Israel at one other stage in my life, and to confirm that the G4, which they was on the point of providing to us, selling to us, I had to check physically on a range that the G4 would fire according to the range tables. Sorry, can we just go back to the G4, that part of the G4? And Operation Askari was mentioned here. I've got a photo. In fact, I've got two photos of G4s being towed during Askari somewhere in Angola. In one case, through a little streamlet. But the description in that book pointed to the fact that those two guns were G6s, which is obviously totally incorrect. They were G4s. The G6s only appeared on the scene much later. I cannot recall, or I haven't got a clear idea of what the Kremlin actually meant for the people who had to perform there. But it was just a stint of rough terrain where course leaders would take their course and do some physical training there, hard physical training. So somebody decided it is tough here, like being in the Kremlin. That's all it amounts to. In fact, our running on a Friday afternoon around the airfield, that was also part of the so-called Kremlin. It was not something dangerous and black and, you could be killed there. That's the wrong image. But on the other hand, troops are bound to create funny words and terms and names. And this is an example of that. No member of my staff invented that name, that word, the Kremlin.
Okay, then the next one is very interesting, actually. It's from Captain Jacques de Tooy, who was in Air Force Intelligence, was actually on Legacy himself. We asked why the Battalier MRL, he says, is a caliber of 127 millimeter. And then he wants to know why was this different to the 122 millimeter of a BM21, which I believe is a stolen oral. And why when did South Africa go for the 127 millimeter? Probably because it's a longer range or something, but I would like to hear your comments, sir.
Of course, yeah, I'm acquainted with this question. In fact, about a week or two ago, maybe a little bit longer, I drew up a total explanation for this, which I posted. I don't know who was on the receiving end. I think, Perry, you've seen it. Now, to answer the question at this point in time, given that there are people who still would like to have an answer, for one other reason, the Russians traditionally, they like the caliber of 122 millimeter, not only for their MRL, but also for, I think they call it the D30 gun howitzer, a gun.
And the D74.
Yeah, as well as a D74. So they were fond with that caliber. Why, I won't know. Now, about the 127 caliber that we decided on, if I say we, I mean our armaments industry. There was also a project in our defense force launched by the Air Force for our armaments industry to develop an air-ground missile, obviously to be fired from aircraft. And the name of that effort was Makopa. Now, Makopa is one other word. Maybe I think it could mean a snake or whatever. It's a Makopa comes from one other black language. So the Makopa project was launched, and for reasons unknown to me, they decided on the caliber of 127 millimeter, which would have been the best caliber for technical reasons for the envisaged air-to-ground missile. Then, in the days of investigating our own MRL effort, the question that obviously popped up in the circles of the people who was working on that requirement, they started asking the question, is there perhaps a good reason why we should also use 122 millimeter as the caliber, or should we not perhaps look into the direction of the Makopa, for which a manufacturing line has already been set up? And then the decision was made, let us go for 127. It will save us a lot of money, a lot of time, because there is there's a set up line of manufacturing line. And that was concluded, and that is why we ended up with 127. Of course, there's a slight another advantage. 127 in comparison to 122 obviously gives you more space inside the rocket, and in our case, more space for steel balls. Perry, there's 127, if I remember correctly, it's got about 8,400 steel balls. So in a case of 122 millimeter, it would have been less. So this decision simply made our rocket more powerful, more deadly, due to increased number of pellets. 4.5 millimeter, I think, small but deadly.
Would it be possible, Wouter, to shoot a 122 millimeter from a 127 millimeter tube?
In a very, very worst case, one could probably have attempted to do that, but you would have no control over accuracy, because the 127 rocket has got nubs on its sides, and those nubs, when you load it, those nubs go into a groove which imparts spin on the rocket. In the case of a 122, yeah, I can think that the rocket would leave the launcher due to its own thrust. But I think you would have no control nor any accuracy. And I think you could also, in time to come, if you would use it more than once, you could damage the tube due to a loose item moving through the tube. So, yeah, no, I think that idea was born dead.
I suppose that the reverse is also true, so that you cannot load a 127 in a 122. So even if they somehow got captured South African equipment, and they never did, but it's useless to them. They can't use it. They can't shoot it at you.
My recollection is that the 127, in terms of metrics, relates to a 5-inch diameter, which was in those days of sanctions was maybe a popular ship's caliber to be at least selected. So I think, being in sanctions and more inclined towards the West, 5-inch or then a 127 caliber was selected. And because of that diameter, the subsequent Ratel ZT3 that Hannes Notman and his men used, and then later on the Rooivalk ZT5 or ZT6 for the Rooivalk was then developed because of the caliber that has been sort of centralized. So I'm still investigating the real origin, but the ZT3 was born after the 127. So I think maybe something from the way we imported our technology from abroad has led to the selection of a 5-inch and hence the 127 caliber. And I think the Chinese defense industry and our defense industry worked on similar approaches using existing calibers at that stage. As the general said, the 122 for the Chinese and the Russians, and the 127 for in the Western world, and hence we selected the 127. And there was I don't think there was any inclination to make it partially compatible with the BM21 or vice versa. Because I think even the electrical supply from the BM21 rocket and that of the rocket of the 127 launch pack, I think there may be electrical points not be compatible.
Julle weet, daai Makopa missiel, ek het oor hom geskryf in 'n boek, word gereken deur Jane's Defence. Dat is die beste anti-tank missiel in die wêreld. Hy hardloop deur 1,5 meter pantserstal. Hardloop hy deur. En ons het hom in die hande gekry omdat die ouens het gevra by die Withuis van Bill Clinton vir die Hellfire. En toe het hulle gesê F jou. En toe gaan bou hulle daai Makopa. Dit beteken blykbaar swart mamba of 'n ding in Soto. Maar ongelooflike ding daai, hulle kan verskillende koppe op hom sit. So jy kan hom skiet met 'n dat hy soos 'n air charge of 'n ding het, hy ontplof. Wat sê woord nou? Ek sal nou 'n bietjie kom, maar jy kan hom gebruik teen 'n huis, jy weet wat hy ingaan en hy ontplof binne die huis, of jy kan hom gebruik op armor. Hulle skiet daai ding deesdae met die rooi valke blykbaar over the horizon. So as jy spesmagte kan hê wat aan die ander kant lê, jy skiet hom in daai rigting, jy breek kontak en jy neek uit. Hy sal daai laser optel. En hy se vol van uithaal. Dis ongelooflike tegnologie. Donald, can you tell us what's the difference between a Valkyrie, a Battelier, and a Visarend? Because it seemed to me that we don't know.
People are using these terms incorrectly. Valkyrie was the name of the project name, not the name of the rocket as such. But on the ground, people tend to use the word Valkyrie when referring to the 127 millimeter rocket launcher, the early type that was mounted on a Unimog chassis. They tend to refer to that equipment as a Valkyrie, but that is actually incorrect. Visarend was actually the name for that piece of equipment, the Visarend, not a Valkyrie. So also when we replaced 24 tubes, or rather 24 tubes with 40 tubes on the SAML-based MRL, that configuration was called the Battelier. In Afrikaans die Berghaan. I can remember, this is just a little piece of interest. While I was the commander of the school, Arms Corps required from us to give a name to the piece of equipment. And I asked all the artillery people in Potchefstroom, not only at my unit, but also at the other units, to come forward with possible names. And the guy whose input I liked the most, namely Battelier, was Jean Lasberg. So he won the sort of competition for the best name. Now, why the Battelier Berghaan? It is a lovely, gracious, strong eagle.
Okay, nee, dit antwoord die vraag. Ek wou sê daai Makopa, dit nou by my opgekom. Die kop wat hulle aan hom sit, as hulle hom skiet na 'n huis of 'n ding, is fuel air explosives.
Ja.
Hy gaan in, hy plof kleintjie en dan kom maar 'n moerse vleis. Hulle kan hom ook skiet teen 'n skip, né? So hy het geweldig ge-upgrade. Ek weet nie of hulle dit nog steeds maak of hulle eers, maar dis wat die ouens sê. Baie interessant. Ek het nie geweet van die Valkyrie en die Visarend en die Battelier nie. Ek weet die Battelier is op 'n SAML 100 en die ander eens op 'n Unimog. So ver my kennis trek.
Ja, dit nog op 'n 2 ton Unimog, wat eintlik heeltemal te lig en te klein was.
Ja.
Hy het sy kant gebring, maar bietjie lig.
Internet, I want to thank you for bringing these questions to us. We all learn from this, and there's no such thing as a stupid question anyway, especially when you speak to the experts as we do here. So thank you for that, and thank you, General, for for answering us so patiently and explaining to us and coming back to us with another episode. And I know we're going to bother you again in the future for other episodes. And also thank you to Colonel Perry Franken. He was sitting there in the background, and I'm sure that without him we would have really struggled technically to do this. Thank you to all of you, and God bless until we meet again.
Dankie Koos.
Koos.
Jy speel 'n belangrike rol in ons almal se lewe en baie dankie vir jou opofferings en jou kundigheid in die verband. Dit gaan nie by ons verby nie, hoor.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.